Hello, welcome to a new episode of Talk Turkey. This week, actually, before our show, we discussed with Murat what to say. I asked Murat, are we gonna say Turkey or Türkiye? And he said, let's stick to Turkey.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing nowadays in Brussels too, because probably the Turkish diplomats are the only ones using the new international name for Turkey. But let's see how it's going to evolve.
People are still saying Turkey?
Yeah.
Okay. Bad news for Ankara, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's one of the top topics, but we're going to rather discuss the NATO-Turkey relations and Turkey's block.
Slightly more important foreign policy.
Slightly more important with Sweden and Finland and what's going on. So do you want to start, Murat?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex case and there are always two sides to every story. I mean, does Turkey have legitimate concerns? Yes, I mean, especially regarding PKK. This is not a new concern though, but this is a legitimate one, and it matters because NATO is a security organization. It's not only about Russia. NATO is active in counterterrorism too, especially following 9/11. Counterterrorism has become increasingly important for NATO, and Turkey has always been supporting this policy of NATO within the organization. And both the EU and US designated PKK as a terrorist organization a very long time ago, and NATO recognizes this too. This is the official and legal aspect. There are different reasons, but it's also true that there are some PKK members and PKK sympathizers in some European countries, including Sweden, obviously not only. And we also saw some protests in the last few weeks, for example, in many European capitals by PKK sympathizers, including Rome, London, Brussels. Why is this tolerated? There are several reasons, and I think we need to understand all of these reasons, both from the European Western perspective, but also from the Turkish perspective, to have a clear picture. One reason is this romanticized view about Kurds in the West, especially among left political parties and groups in Turkey. And it's not only about Kurds, but many ethnic groups in the world. There is a sympathy towards Kurds in Europe, and because many Europeans believe that Kurds have always been victims. And PKK is actually using and abusing this sympathy. Second reason is much more pragmatic. PKK's sister organization, PYD, is seen as an important actor by many Western countries in the West against ISIS and other jihadist groups in Syria. Actually, some countries have sort of subcontracted this war. For example, from French perspective, it's better that PYD fights with ISIS, and in this way, French soldiers would not be in the forefront of the war. There's a pragmatic and selfish stand, but this is the case. PYD is actually useful for some countries in the West. Kurds are dying in this war, and rather than soldiers from these countries, it's a selfish choice, and it's even questionable from the point of view of Kurds as well, but this is the reality. And third reason is also connected to this. PKK, PYD is seen as a major and existential threat by Turkey. However, this is not the case for other NATO and EU countries. There's a major gap in terms of perception of threat. For those countries, PKK, PYD is not a threat, but as I mentioned, PYD is even seen as a partner, and this gap is important. This doesn't mean that these countries totally tolerate PKK in Europe. This is not the case, and I think there was a major shift, especially after 90s, when many Europeans realized that PKK is also very active in organized crime and trafficking in Europe. In this sense, it is not a perceived threat by many European countries, but its illegal activities are alerting for many European countries. Maybe they are tolerated to a certain extent, but this doesn't mean that they are not under scrutiny, especially, for example, this is the case in Germany. There are, of course, exceptions too, such as Greece, where PKK operates freely to a large extent. probably Sweden is somewhere in between. And it's clear that Sweden has never taken PKK very seriously. There are many PKK sympathizers in the country, and PKK, Sweden has also been indirectly supporting PYD, just like some other European countries. These three reasons are there, but then there is also the fourth reason, and which will help us to understand the other side of the story and why Turkey's side of the story is not perceived or understood, or why some countries are skeptical about it. This is connected to 3 points. One is Turkey's international image nowadays. 2 major issues in Turkey in terms of the rule of law, fundamental rights and freedom, democracy. And 3 changes in Turkish foreign policy in the last 10 to 15 years. This is important because many in the West are questioning whether Turkey is still an ally. Such things are also actively used by anti-Turkey groups, countries, lobbies in the West. In this sense, if Turkey has issues in terms of explaining itself, it's not only about the mistakes of the West, but it's also connected to Turkey's policies and also developments in Turkey. Certain issues are questioned in the West, and it makes sense. For example, definition of terrorism and terrorist in Turkey is one of those issues. The line is very blurry in Turkey nowadays. Not only real terrorists, but almost everyone in the country can be accused of being a terrorist. I mean, you can even be accused as a terrorist because of a tweet. And I'm sure personally you already experienced this in the past. That's also why it matters to have a democratic system in line with EU standards. If this was the case, probably less people would question Turkey's concerns in the West. I mean, clearly defining terrorism is really important, and it's also a fundamental element of counterterrorism. And that's also why I think communication channels between the West and Turkey are not working effectively nowadays, because 2 sides don't speak the same language. Moreover, Turkey's current image is making everything much more complicated. It was the same when it comes to Eastern Mediterranean crisis. I mean, 2-3 years ago, Turkey had, again, some legitimate concerns, but many in the West didn't even question the fact that whether Turkey could be right. The main understanding in the West is that if Turkey claims something, Turkey is probably wrong. That's the perception, and that perception matters. And I mean, that's why we need to understand this element too. But we need to understand and also underline one point clearly. I mean, some of Turkey's concerns are indeed legitimate, and it's not only about Erdoğan and AKP. That's also why probably we need to understand the general mood in Turkey, how opposition parties see it, how public opinion is seeing the issue. Maybe you can also summarize like the general mood so that we can understand if it's Erdoğan's policy, because that's the main understanding and perception here. It's like, this is Erdoğan, this is AKP. Maybe it's more than that, is it?
Well, I mean, I've been discussing with people. We're doing these Vox Populi here and there about all these foreign policy issues. Well, people have started saying, actually, Erdoğan is trying to, just change the topic, because the main topic in Turkey is economy. And who are like man on the street, they say, well, Erdoğan is trying to distract people, because since Turkey is in this dire financial crisis, it's people's #1 agenda, and people are not really into a lot, this Greece, Sweden, Finland a lot these days. But it used to work much more better for Erdoğan. So this is seen partly as moves from Mr. Erdoğan, actually for the internal domestic politics. And but people think, I mean, most analysts see that some early elections are possible in Turkey. So these moves actually are rather, they think, this foreign policy issues are being discussed, and Erdoğan is getting harsher towards EU about Sweden, Finland, and also now this tension between Greece is going to help Erdoğan maybe win another election. That's what some think. But also another topic, when I read the foreign press or when I talk to Turkey analysts, what they wonder is Turkey's foreign policy is going to change if the government changes? I mean, what will change? What do the opposition parties think? That's the big question. And as far as I understand, nobody really knows what they think. I mean, in European countries or in the United States, because most of these opposition parties are very closed, in a sense, to the foreign world. You know, they're much more. They're not really going to Brussels, Strasbourg, or Washington, D.C. and communicating with other political players, but rather they're like concentrated in Turkey, so nobody knows them. While the main opposition party's leader, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, he actually made a statement about Turkey's blockade of Sweden and Finland. And he said he, of course, knows Turkey's concerns about some countries' support towards terrorist organizations, and there are some points which Turkey is right about. But he said this megaphone diplomacy that Erdoğan is basically doing, Erdoğan is committing, is not right. Kılıçdaroğlu openly said, this is not how you conduct diplomacy. You should just talk about these in a serious manner with other political actors in the international community around the table. Not through tweeting or like coming and shouting in a rally. That's not how it works. You should do it in a much more serious way. Meral Akşener as well. I mean, I should actually point the main opposition party, CHP, is kind of like the center-left party in Turkey. And far left and left in Turkey is traditionally against NATO. They think Turkey should not be a part of NATO, and they're also suspicious towards the EU. So CHP, as a center-left party, has different wings. So there are more central figures in CHP and some central voters, which are like more sympathetic towards the EU and NATO. But the far left and left wing of CHP is more suspicious towards the NATO and the EU. Anyway,
and some nationalist left parts.
They are more nationalist left, I'd say. Yeah, also what we call ulusalcı, you know. And Kılıçdaroğlu is trying to balance both sides within the party, so he's really very careful when he's making policy statements and he's making statements about foreign policy. Though Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu has one foreign policy advisor. He is a former ambassador, Ünal Çeviköz. He has given an interview to one of the Swedish newspapers, and he said his party totally supports Sweden's bid to join the NATO. And after this interview was published, Ünal Çeviköz was criticized harshly, very harshly, by pro-government media, less harshly by some, in a sense, opposition members. So let's put that aside. Another opposition party is İyi Party of Meral Akşener. This is the main center-right opposition party. While İyi Party, actually, they are more positive towards the NATO. They don't have this suspicion, and the EU. As we see, they're more kind of integrated. They envision a more integrated Turkey with NATO and the EU, as far as we understand from their discourse. So this is their line, and obviously there is HDP, mainly the Kurdish party. They rather fall on the left of the spectrum in Turkey, and they are traditionally suspicious towards the NATO. But though HDP is supportive of Turkey's EU membership, as most of the minorities within the other European countries, because they believe that Turkey is going to be more democratic and there'll be more space for minorities. But they see NATO as kind of like as an American organization that is designing the policies of member states. So they have this. But HDP has not been vocal about this Finland-Sweden issue, basically. But what HDP underlines is what you have underlined. So, well, yes, Turkey wants. So Turkey, like in one of the pro-government newspapers, there was 10 points that Turkey wants from Finland and Sweden. They listed 10 points, and one of the 10 points, like they say, okay, there are no your terrorists, my terrorists. We should, you should respect Turkey's security concerns. You should deport terrorists. Yes, but who do you mean by terrorists? For example, there is one figure, Ragıp Zarakolu. He's an intellectual, a writer. Basically, he used to have a column in one of the Kurdish newspapers. And Turkey wants the deportation of Ragıp Zarakolu as a terrorist, as a PKK member. What he did was just write a column. And according to Swedish law, this is not illegal. What I come across in social media and from my viewers is that they're saying, for example, well, Sweden is supporting PKK because we see people demonstrating on streets of Stockholm or Göteborg with PKK flags. Well, I mean, but according to Swedish law, using PKK flag is not a crime. Using ISIS flag and making a demonstration on Sweden's streets with an ISIS flag is not a crime. As long as you don't turn to violence, you don't take up guns, it's not a crime. So it's harder for Turkish people to understand, I think, because the standard of democracy in Turkey really declined. And in this spectrum of freedoms versus security, what people rather understand is like people, I mean, majority of Turkey give much more importance to security, actually. You know, I think we have this disbalance in this spectrum. I think this is one of the problems. You know, you mentioned we're not speaking the same language. I think this is one of the key reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but on the other hand, of course, there is, to a certain extent at least, that issue of my terrorists and your terrorists. I mean, I don't know about Sweden, but in Brussels, one thing is very clear. Like if you go out with an ISIS flag, you would get an operation by counterterrorism unit of the Belgian Federal Police. You cannot escape. But you can escape if it's a PKK flag. So there is this understanding of like and perception of threat, that's clear. But also, I mean, I think one issue is, there are no mainstream political parties who are officially against Turkey's NATO membership. That's one thing. But then there is a level of skepticism about NATO among public opinion in Turkey. And public support to NATO may be increased following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And this is the case according to different polling firms as well. But there is still this skepticism. And it is there both in the left and the right side of the political spectrum. In the left, it has always been there. It's traditionally there because they believe that NATO means US and they are anti-American. In the right, it's rather a new development. And I think all these conspiracy theories have been playing a role as well. And the interesting issue is that when the issue is discussed, it's usually discussed as if NATO is an organization where Turkey is not even a member. NATO does this, NATO does that, NATO has these plans, but Turkey is NATO. And as we can see in the case of Sweden and Finland, when Turkey does not want something, actually, it can block it because that's how it works in NATO. But somehow the image is very different in Turkey. NATO is perceived as an entity which has been imposing things on Turkey. It's important to take this, I think, very seriously too, and to do more about this because NATO is actually important for Turkey. I mean, this should be better explained to public too, because Russia is a major threat for Turkey. And actually the fundamental reason Turkey wanted to join NATO was the Russian threat. I mean, Soviets claimed things on Turkey, especially about Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits. Turkey has never been happy about the status of Bosphorus and Montreux Convention. And it has not changed because Montreux is still influencing Russia's plans negatively nowadays. So if Turkey was out of NATO, probably Russia would start to discuss the status of those straits from the first day. And maybe it's not the topic of today, but we should also be aware of the power of Russian disinformation efforts in Turkey, probably. Because Russian disinformation is seen as a major threat in the West, but we don't really discuss this issue in Turkey. Obviously, it's not the only reason, but Russian disinformation and propaganda efforts are also certainly playing a major role in the skepticism about NATO and the West in Turkey. It's there, it's very active, but we don't even talk about it.
Yes. Well, one of the speculations about Turkey's blockage of Sweden's and Finland's bid to NATO was, these are all speculations, it's really hard to verify too, you know. Turkey wants to conduct a military operation in the northern Syria to cities, Tel Aviv and Manbij, which are they are in control of the Russians. So Mr. Erdoğan has spoken to Mr. Putin, and Çavuşoğlu is speaking to Mr. Lavrov. Turkey is trying to get a go from Russia. These areas, I mean, they're under the control of Russia, but they're under, I mean, Russia and Syrian Democratic Forces, which Turkey sees as same as PKK, basically. So Turkey wants to clear those two cities from Syrian Democratic Forces, and Turkey wants to have like a 30-kilometer line under control. And Turkey claims this is for Turkey's security, and from these cities, this terrorist organization can attack Turkey. They try to get a go from Russia. So this sort of coincided with Turkey's plans to have an operation in northern Syria and Sweden's and Finland's bid. So how it was seen is like, so Turkey is blocking Sweden and NATO as a favor to Russia. And maybe then Russia is going to give Turkey a go to conduct this military operation just before the elections, which are going to be really important for Mr. Erdoğan because he's losing in the polls. So if he can do such an operation and again create this feeling of gathering around the flag, this would be really useful for him. So this was one of the topics.
Yeah, but I mean, is it really realistic? Because I mean, okay, we talk about the PKK and the West, but and usually Turkey accuses West about double standards, but I think in Turkey's discourse there's a double standard too, because if it comes to PKK and PYD, so Russia has excellent relations with both organizations. I mean, both PKK and PYD, they have representation office in the middle of Moscow. So, but even following the meetings with Russia, Turkey is usually accusing West about the approach towards PKK, PYD, but we don't really see Turkey criticizing, or Turkish government criticizing Russia about support to PKK and PYD. So there as well, we have this double discourse, but also because of this level of strategic cooperation between Russia and PYD, that's also, I think, not very likely that they would allow Turkey to do this. So I'm not sure this would work in line with the plans, and that's why I don't think this is really connected. Maybe they tried, but I'm not sure if they are really connected.
Yeah, I don't know if they're connected or not, but these things.
Yeah, there are of course so many speculations because no one is really explaining very well. I mean, until very recently, actually, until the official application of these two countries, nobody knew Turkey's position. I mean, apparently the Finnish president knew.
I saw something interesting actually. One of the Norwegian, I'm sorry, not Norwegian. He's Finnish journalists. Janne Korhonen, he has spoken to Finland president Niinistö, right? And Niinistö says he's spoken to Erdoğan on 4th of April. And Mr. Erdoğan said, well, if you want to join NATO, we are totally supporting you. If you make the official application, Turkey will be supporting. And now Niinistö says, well, I'm kind of surprised. I don't understand what the issue is really. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting.
Welcome to our world, right?
Welcome to our world. Yeah, it's kind of hard to trust Turkey in that sense because Mr. Erdoğan is known to be a pragmatist. And since he's a pragmatist, he tends to change his mind really quickly. So Finland is like, well, we don't really know what the problem is.
Yeah. And also the fact is that there's no fundamental issue because Turkey has always been supporting actually NATO's enlargement, actually was even pushing for some Western Balkan countries to be NATO members as soon as possible. So it is in line with Turkey's NATO policy. I mean, I understand the concerns, I talked about the concerns, but it's also important how you implement your foreign policy. I mean, you cannot have this double discourse, you cannot say something one day and change other day. But even since the official application of these two countries, we see different statements coming from Turkey. And sometimes even from different government officials, we see different statements. Like sometimes the foreign minister is taking it a bit more easy way, and then the president is saying something harsh, and then the next day it's changing. First they said that we have nothing to discuss with these two countries. And then they started to discuss. So it's like, it's a bit of a mess, and I don't know how we are going to go out of this, but nothing is impossible either. I mean, the NATO summit is in 3 weeks now, and I'm sure there are efforts also coming from NATO and also from the United States, but we'll see to what extent it is possible. But I mean, NATO is important for Turkey too. That's why I also don't understand all the discussions about like questioning the importance of NATO or whether we should be part of NATO. It's a late discussion, like late for like 70 years late. And I don't believe any government in Turkey would realistically consider leaving NATO either. But it's also reciprocal. I mean, despite all issues, I think Turkey is still very important for NATO too, considering the Russian threat, increasing Chinese threat, and even increasing Iranian threat nowadays, with all these issues about the nuclear plan. So I think one must really lose his or her mind to question actually Turkey's NATO membership nowadays. And this is even the case for Greece, because we talk about Turkey being like nationalist or populist, but we see also sort of populism coming from Greece too. I mean, I think if Turkey belonging to the West, that's the best guarantee for Greece, actually. I mean, if I was a Greek politician, I would wholeheartedly support Turkey staying in NATO, Turkey being member of the EU, because those are the best guarantees, actually, for the future of Greece. So what we see nowadays, though, it is more about really like populism at that side of the Aegean Sea as well. So that's something we need to discuss too, probably.
As you mentioned, Aegean Sea, latest discussions, I want to show Alexis Tsipras's latest tweet. He tweeted in Turkish, and he said, "Well, yes, Greece is going to basically protect its own sovereignty, but however, what we need to do is go back to the international dialogue and international law, and not try. The answer to the financial crisis that we're all facing is not nationalism, basically." I mean, he's right in a sense. However, about this Finland and Sweden, I don't think this is going to be resolved soon, Murat, what I think, because Turkey does not usually have many cards to play, especially these days, since Turkey has been having this isolating itself foreign policy for like a decade now, doesn't have much advantages on its own side. So now Turkey has finally got a card to play with. So I think what Turkey is going to try to do, I mean, this government, they're going to try to gain as much as they can and try to play this Finland-Sweden card as long as they can. And they'll look and see what they can get, whatever they can get, be it, I don't know, this F-35 program. It's very hard, not possible, or whatever. Or this, the new deal about these F-16s, if they cannot go for F-35s, this is going to be on the table. And I don't know, like Sweden was not selling military equipment to Turkey to, get it back. They now they started selling, they'll just look and see whatever they can get, and they're going to try to drag this problem on as long as they can. This is my wild guess.
I mean, this is true to a large extent, but I also believe that there is still a chance, considering that there are 3 weeks, and then also the perception in Brussels when you discuss with people in NATO, they are also a bit more optimistic, and they believe that they can convince Turkey and they can assure Turkey of certain things. Of course, it's not very easy. On the one hand, yes, Sweden and Finland should do things. On the other hand, I think there's a broader issue with the United States and what President Biden can or can't do. And of course, the issue is also about to what extent, especially Sweden, is ready to give certain written promises by explaining this to their own public opinion. Because, I mean, certain demands, as you explained, such as extradition requests, are not realistic under these conditions. Agreeing this would bring the end of any government, I think, in Sweden or Finland, considering Turkey's image and the issues in terms of rule of law in Turkey. But both countries can do, I mean, things against PKK. That's very clear. There can be some concrete steps, at least. Of course, you'll see to what extent these steps can really satisfy Turkey. And then the big issue will be really, like what US and NATO in general can offer to Turkey, because in the past too we had similar crises. One was about, for example, the position of Rasmussen before he became the Secretary General of NATO. Turkey was also blocking it, but finally, at the end of the day, there was a solution, and there were some concessions coming from NATO as well. So it was possible to find a solution. So this is not the first crisis within NATO, and Turkey is not the first country blocking things. I mean, for example, Greece blocks for a very long time also. Macedonia, and they even had to change the name, as you know.
That was really ridiculous.
I mean, considering the situation is very urgent, what's happening in Ukraine, I think NATO would like to send a clear message to Russia by approving this membership in this month at the summit, because it's also an important summit. NATO's new strategic concept will also be adopted. So I think it is difficult, but both NATO and the United States probably will do their best to find a way as well.
Yeah, we'll live through it and see.
Yeah. Till next time.
Till next time. Bye.